Sound people, welcome back to another episode in this amazing series. Today, we are going to be going over everything in this section of the board. Nope, not bus sounds, not yet. Just main stuff, gain dynamics, and EQ. Alright, let's get into it. So, we learned in very basics, basically how the channel system works. There's a series of channels, or buses right now. There's a series of channels. Each one has a fader, a mute button, the option to solo it, which is used for a bunch of technical settings involving the monitor, but we'll get to that later. Don't worry about solo for right now. The meter, and the select, that allows you to select the channel, and every channel can be selected. However, the fader and the mute button aren't the only options you have. You also have a giant series of knobs for equalization, gate dynamics, gain, all that other good stuff, but it's only available to you if you have that channel selected. So, let's talk about what that stuff does. Well, obviously, when mixing, a lot of people think about volume as the most important thing. But how do you do all the stuff that isn't volume? Well, if you select a channel, then you get to see everything else up here. Number one is the simplest, gain. So, the fader controls volume. I have a mic right here. I'm talking into a lovely little mic that's coming out of that speaker. You can see it talking, coming out of the matrix. That is the matrix that this speaker is on. And as I am talking, you can hear my volume at roughly this level. Let me find a way to position myself so that the microphone stays next to my mouth. There we go. This is very precarious. I'm currently clenching the microphone between my knees, but you don't need to see that. Oh, I almost fell over. But if I turn the fader down, you can hear that suddenly you can't hear me anymore. And if I turn the fader up, then now you can hear me really loud. However, this fader only controls the volume of the output. You can imagine a mixing console as like a train station, right? And like train comes in, train goes out. So this microphone is basically allowing my voice to be that train that's coming into the station. That train is coming into the station with, let's say, 10 passengers. That 10 passengers is how loud my voice is. However, this fader here allows me to change the number of passengers that get on and off the train at the station. So, you'll notice that the fader is a little interesting in that 0 is not in the middle. Here in sound design, I'm going to stop using the mic for a minute. We actually have a special name for 0. Oh god, voice crack, jeez. We actually have a special name for 0, which is unity. And it's called unity because putting a fader at 0 means that there is no amplification. The microphone is coming out of the speaker exactly as loud as it's coming in. Except that's not true, because there's also gain. While fader controls how many people get on and off, like, at the end of the station, it controls how loud the Barry is pushing out sound. Gain controls how much sound Barry is taking in the first place. The way you can think about it is the fader is volume for the output, and gain is volume for the input. And so, if you have a sound that's like 10 passengers, and the gain is at 0, gain being 0 is straight to the left. That is gain being 0. We know because if you hit view, and you look at gain, oh, it was a little bit above. Straight to the left is 0 decibels. Okay. So, if gain is at 0 and the fader is at 0, if both of these are at 0, then it's taking in the exact same amount of sound, it's not changing it, and then it's sending it straight out the speaker. So now, in theory, the speaker is sending out my voice exactly as loud as I'm talking into it. Lovely. However, if I turn up the gain and talk again, you can hear that I'm now significantly louder. If I turn down the gain, you can hear that I'm now significantly quieter. I'm not changing the gain too much because gain also affects a lot more than controlling the fader. Faders do this too, but gain very much so affects the mic's sensitivity, and changing that can make the mic very easily feedback. We're gonna get into feedback a lot more later. Yeah, that's gain. Another way you can think about it is how loud the mic is, how loud it is when you hear it, is this value, the fader value, multiplied by the gain value. Like these two are multiplied by each other, if you want to think about how that works algebraically. Okay, lovely. That is gain. This is the low cut. We're going to get to that because the low cut is really just part of the EQ. For example, if you set these knobs in a certain way, this knob and this knob now control the exact same thing. They're the exact same thing. This knob just allows you to see the low cut at all times. Cool. Let's not do EQ for now. Oh, we can do these two tiny buttons here. These two tiny buttons, you only ever want to press if you're dealing with a very specific kind of microphone that's plugged in. 48 volts is, well, it tells the mixing console to basically only send 48 volts of power to that microphone. A lot of big microphones like this take a lot more than 48 volts, but small, tiny microphones like choir mics that hang from the cats down there require much less power. So you only want to send 48 volts of power to them or else they won't work. So whenever you're using them, you're going to want to select the 48 volts button. Next, the phase invert button, I believe that's its name. It's a really weird button, and frankly, you're never going to use it. So to explain what it does, microphones work because there's a little disc inside that when you talk into it, it vibrates, and it sends those vibrations as electricity waves to a transmitter that sends it to a receiver, an antenna then to a receiver, and then to the board. Blah, 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 blah. Little disc that vibrates. Speakers work because there's basically a big disc that vibrates to create the sound. And so, if you haven't noticed, little disc, big disc, wait a minute, why can't we just have speakers work as microphones and microphones work as speakers? Because they're not designed for it, except some of them are. There's sometimes these little speakers that can also double as microphones, but they only work as microphones if you tell them to work as microphones. And the way you tell them is by pressing the phase invert on their channel. Lovely. That's what that does. Okay. Whoop-a-doop-a-doo. Ooh, gate. Gate's a fun one. The kids in my crew will know about gate very well because I made a very questionable analogy to kids at a carnival. Am I going to use the same one? Yeah, sure, why not? No, actually, I think the train station works better. Okay, so, gate. What is gate? Gate is basically, if your sound is not loud enough, and I think we'll actually be able to see this pretty well. So, that little dot is my voice, and as I talk into this microphone, you can see that dot move. You see that we have this little slope here, but see where it drops straight down? That's the gate. And you'll notice that this red bar fills up every time I try to talk, but I don't make it past the gate. If my voice is not loud enough, then nothing gets sent. If my voice is just barely loud enough, then it gets sent full blast. Or, well, not full blast, but as loud as it should be. But if I fail to meet that gate, you can hear, without a gate, if you press, hold on, if you press this knob, or if you press this button, then the gate turns gray, and that means that it's not active. You can hear, right now, I'm talking straight into the mic, and as I slowly bring the mic away from my voice as I continue talking, you can hear me get quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter. I'm about to try the exact same experiment with the gate on. The gate is now on. I'm talking into the mic, and I'm going to slowly bring it away from my voice, and instead of hearing me get quieter and quieter, you hear me kind of get quieter, and then there's a sudden just stop, and you can stop hearing me at all right about there. Actually, I think that would have been more effective if I turned up where the gate was. This little knob, threshold, also this knob, which is also called threshold because they do the exact same thing, control where the gate is. So if I move the gate to be about here, and I do that exact same experiment, so I'm talking with the mic close to my mouth, and as I move the mic slowly away from my mouth while I continue to talk, you can hear that it gets really choppy, and then you just can't hear anything else at all. So, that is what a gate is. The rest of these knobs. Mode can control the shape of your gate. So for example, this is a graph in which this x-axis is the amount of sound that is received, the y-axis is the amount of sound that's being sent out. And so you can just interpret all of these lines in exactly that way. So this means that if you're receiving an amount, it's not a straight line down, which means if you're talking at this volume, you're still gonna get way less, but still a little bit of sound. The duck one is fun. It means that, well, if I'm talking, hold on, duck, you have to like find the right level to talk at. Okay, so right there, you can hear my voice kind of loud, but if I talk any louder than that, you hear it start to get really choppy and cut out because I'm right on that thing. But if I adjust the threshold, there we go. Now, whenever I talk normally, you can't hear me at all. But if I whisper, you can hear me whisper. Can you hear me whisper? Yeah. So duck can be used in some really interesting situations. Hey, look, some feedback. We're gonna get more to feedback later when we talk about dynamics. Okay, lovely. And then the range. Range is the last knob that is important to know. Attack is if you trigger the gate. Attack is how long, the gate doesn't just start automatically, the gate like fades in. This is how long the gate fades in, which is set to 10 milliseconds, which is nothing. Hold is the minimum amount of time the gate is active. So if we have a gate and I'm talking, if I'm talking and I just barely pass the gate and then come back down, the gate will stay open, meaning it will still send my voice if I'm right past it because hold. Hold is the minimum amount of time that the gate can be active. So if it would end earlier than 28.2 milliseconds, it stays on for at least 28.2 milliseconds. Release, the opposite of attack. Attack is how long the gate takes to fade in. Release is how long the gate takes to fade out. Notice that release is always way longer than attack. Range is just how strong the gate is. Range, because we use our gates mainly to cut out for feedback, to adjust for feedback, and to stop mics from picking up other actors, our range is always as high as it can be. If you don't want to have nearly as oppressive of a gate, you can turn the range down. Cool. Lovely. Yeah. Okay, I think that's about all you need to cover on gate. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to dynamics. So we learned what dynamics are. Dynamics goes by a lot of different names. You can call it like a high gate, dynamic gate, just dynamics, comp, X, whatever. Basically, dynamics has the exact same graph, but whoa, the line is over here this time because it does the opposite. Dynamics takes any sounds that are too loud and brings them down to the same level as everything else. I was once talking to a random sound engineer that walked into the booth, and we randomly started talking about dynamics, and I kid you not, we just kept talking about how friggin' magical and useful dynamics were for like 5 minutes straight. It's really cool. So, if I were to fully scream into this mic, which I'm not going to right now, the scream would only be as loud out of the speaker as it's being heard right now. Because of that dynamic. That is causing the volume to not be a straight line up, which means that if I am louder than the dynamic lets me be, then the board will pull me back down to the level of me talking normally. Really great for acting, because the thing is, if somebody screams on stage, it reads as a scream no matter how loud it is. Now obviously if it's like turned completely off, it's gonna sound weird, but if you have a strong dynamic gate and somebody screams, it's still gonna read as a scream, which is the most important part, and it's also not gonna break people's eardrums, which is also very important. Dynamics are also super useful for controlling feedback. Okay, so dynamics also has attack, hold, and release, which do the exact same thing as normal attack, hold, and release. It also has ratio. Ratio is the slope of this line. A ratio of 1 to 1 is the same thing as just turning your dynamic gate off. A ratio of 3 to 1, which is most commonly used for vocalists and songs, is that kind of slope right there. However, if you go for a full 100, then that means straight line. It is fully capping the volume. Now, if I take the threshold and I turn it down while keeping that ratio at 100, you'll notice something interesting happen. This means that no matter how loud I talk, I am coming out of the speaker at the same volume no matter what. Isn't that interesting? That means that suddenly the amplitude of the wavelengths that my voice is giving off, how loud that I am into this microphone, or how quiet I am into this microphone, it doesn't make a difference what the speaker puts out. It's going to put out the same volume sound no matter what I say. And we can do some fun stuff with this. So, I'm talking normally now. Let's talk about feedback. This is gonna hurt some people's eardrums. Feedback is the phenomenon caused, a lot of people know about feedback now because of Google Meets, but it is the audio engineer's worst nightmare. If you talk into a microphone, and that microphone is being sent out through a speaker, and that speaker sends out the sound waves, and it hits the microphone, then that microphone is gonna take the sound waves from the speaker and send it back to the speaker, and it's gonna send it out, and it's gonna send it out again, and it's gonna send it out again. Let's talk about the biggest misconception. When you send sound through a speaker, it comes out the same volume. Just this process of this loop where the sound is coming out of the speaker and coming back to the microphone, that loop does not inherently make feedback loud. That would not produce nearly the same kind of feedback that you're used to hearing. What causes that is when the sound comes out of the loop, everything is the exact same volume except for one frequency. And what frequency is that? Whoa, it's the distance between the speaker and the microphone. That wavelength, all of the frequencies in that sound that are exactly that wavelength will be amplified naturally, just because that's the physics of sound waves. So when you talk into a microphone and it starts feeding back, all of the sound is the exact same except for that one note that's being amplified. And that's what causes feedback to play a musical note, is the distance from the speaker. Because we learned in the sound day lesson that due to the speed of sound being a constant, distance, aka wavelength, and frequency are the same thing. Every frequency is correlated with a distance. So every single note on a guitar is correlated to the length of the string on the guitar that is vibrating, and also the length of the guitar itself that's vibrating. But we can do some interesting stuff. Welcome to one of the coolest lessons that I do with my kids, controlled feedback. What happens if I talk into a microphone, I purposely cause it to feed back, but I have the dynamic gate set to this cap so that it can't get any louder? So you'll notice that, as I was saying earlier, when I talk into a microphone, oh, it's off right now, sorry. When I talk into a microphone with this dynamic gate on, it's controlling my voice so that I can only be one volume. If I turn this down to nothing, what do you think's gonna happen? Whoa, you can't hear me anymore. You barely can hear me anymore. You really can't, and that's because no matter what volume I speak at, it's putting me down to 0. So we can do some fun stuff. Behold! Controlled feedback. Notice how as I pull the microphone away, it's still feeding back, but it gets lower in pitched because the wavelength between the speaker and the microphone is increasing in length. That wavelength is increasing, so the note that's being played louder than all the others is getting longer, meaning it's getting deeper in pitch. And when it gets too far away, obviously the speaker is not reaching the microphone anymore. Oh, because I have my gate on. Hold on, I was supposed to turn the gate off for this. There we go. Let's turn this down to decrease that cap. Okay, maybe I turned it a little too far down. There we go. You hear that feedback? I want it a little louder. Lower pitched? Higher pitched? Lower pitched? Higher pitched. It's kind of hard to hear. Anyways, that is a little experiment that you can do with your kids to show them that feedback can be used for some cool stuff, including Yeah, that pitch oscillation only happens because the distance between the microphone and the speaker is changing, which is causing the note that is being amplified in the feedback to change as well. Lovely. I'm going to stop berating your eardrums now, and I'm going to stop purposefully causing the mic to feedback. Lovely. Let's fix our dynamic gate here. Let's fix our normal gate. Oh, it was just off. Lovely. Okay, I'm back. Neat. That is gate, dynamics, and now you know gain. Let's talk about low cut and EQ. EQ is so important to know because this is a lot of what sound check is and mixing. A lot of people think that mixing and sound check is entirely just controlling volumes, but no. It's also about controlling the frequencies of the sound themselves. So if you hit view on the EQ page, it takes you to the EQ page, which you can also get to just by pressing home up here and then scrolling to the EQ page. And it will show you the EQ and the spectrograph for whatever you have selected. Lovely. So I'm talking and you can hear the frequencies of my voice. That is because nothing in this world is a perfect musical note.
Yeah, 1 second.
Lighting kids. Nothing in this world is a perfect musical note, and everything vibrates the air at many different frequencies at the same time, but some are louder than others. And you can see right now, as I talk, the reds are louder than the blues. But my voice is giving off all of these frequencies because I'm not trying to sing. Now, musical notes are one concentrated frequency. Lila, sing a note for me. You can clearly see that when Lila was singing that note, there was a lot less of this wide distribution of frequencies. It was like one concentrated area. And that's because a musical note is one frequency, and when humans try to sing musical notes, what we're really trying to do is just produce one frequency. You can see there was high peaks of red, barely anything else. Why do you think there were multiple peaks there? I have no idea what I'm singing, I'm just singing random notes. Why do you think there were multiple red peaks, and why do you think that they seem to move with each other? Wait, it's almost like that was the same note in different chords. Because notice that the little bar at the bottom, this entire graph, by the way, the y-axis is just how loud it is, and the x-axis is the frequency, and whoa, it goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz because that is the human audible hearing range. So notice that this bar, like decibel scales, is logarithmic, meaning that that same note, oh man, I forgot to explain how notes and chords worked in the sound day lesson. That is completely my bad. I'll explain it right now. So every note is a wavelength, and the wavelengths that are perfectly half of the previous ones, they still repeat at the same intervals, which means that to the human ear, they sound eerily similar because they're the same musical note in a different chord. So if you take one frequency and play the exact same thing but with half the frequency, that is the note because that's higher pitched up a chord. There you go. That's how chords work, and why musical notes repeat but at higher frequencies. EQ. This yellow stuff, you're probably wondering what it is. Well, to turn off EQ, you can press this button here, which is also the same as pressing this button here. But that doesn't do it, because there's also this funky little boy called the low cut. This bad boy. You can turn him off by pressing this button. So, what is EQ? Give me a second. EQ! What is EQ? Sorry about that. So, these right here are a magical set of knobs that allow you to basically control volume for every single frequency in the range of frequency that your voice is producing. You're able to not just turn up all of the frequencies at the same time, which is what the fader does, you're able to turn up some frequencies more than others and turn others down. So, for example, if I go to these four buttons, allow you to control where roughly the frequencies you want to affect are. High, mid, and low for the four different frequencies. This button basically allows you to get even more precision, because if you go high, you can either tell the board to do, you're trying to turn down the highs or you're trying to cut out the highs. If you're trying to cut out the highs, set the mode to high cut. If you're trying to just turn the highs down, you can change it to, did I just accidentally, yeah, just like a normal EQ for highs. Then you can also change it between PEQ and VEQ. The difference, as you can see, it's very hard to see, but it's in the shape of those little curves there. One of them is a little steeper than the other. Okay. And also VEQ and PEQ, the difference between them has something to do with the techniques and logistics of the way EQing evolved. Don't worry about it. These are basically just interchangeable for you. Lovely. So, these three knobs. Watch how they affect. With these knobs, I'm gonna go to the low mids, and I'm basically just going to create, you can see that number 2 is filled in right now, and also it's highlighted number 2 because that's what I've selected right now, low mids. If I select high mids, you can see that now I've selected the purple one. I want to select the yellow one because I have this big open space. And as I talk, you'll notice that my voice is really big in that yellowish area. However, it's a little to the right of that. So, we're going to use the frequency. This frequency knob controls where exactly the low mid is. You can get even more precise. Wait a minute, Gus. If this is lows, low mids, high mids, and highs, then what's stopping you from using the frequency knob from setting the low mids like way above the highs? Nothing is stopping you. Just don't do it, because then you're bad, and I don't like you anymore. That was a joke. Anyways.
Too funny.
Shut up, Lila. Okay. So, now we can see that I've adjusted the yellow low mid frequency to be a lot more closer to where the peak of my voice is. Now, the reason why we EQ, and especially why we EQ actors, is because it is generally easier to understand an actor's voice. We can hear their words and consonants and vowels more clearly if their frequencies are even. The more even their frequencies are, the easier it is for us to understand them. That's just like a human perception thing. So, what we're trying to do with my voice here is we're trying to take these red frequencies, we're trying to only turn the red frequencies down while turning the rest of the frequencies up. So obviously, that spike isn't helping us, so we're gonna have to get rid of that one in a little bit. But for right now, we're gonna take the gain knob and turn it down, and as I turn down the gain, it creates a spike. Whoa, that spike is so wide. What is causing that spike to be so wide? The Q knob. This controls how wide the spike is. I don't need it to be that wide, I only need it to be like about that wide. Gain controls how high / low the spike is. And frequency just determines where the spike is. That's all you need to know to create these spikes and affect the volume of the frequency. So right now I'm turning this band down a little bit. High frequencies, to change those, I'm gonna find which frequency it is. It seems to be on highs. And I'm just going to take the gain knob and take it out. Lovely. And now you can hear my voice. Ooh, my frequency distribution has changed a little bit. I'm going to want to take the highs that I selected earlier, move them to the right a bit, and up that Q a little bit. There we go, that should help. Okay, and now naturally you can hear, actually, I can even hear it. My voice is already starting to sound clearer because of that one EQ. EQing is a lot of fine tuning, it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of getting a good ear. This spectrograph can really help, but also when you're EQing in the theater, you usually don't want to be sitting here because these glass panels and just the acoustics of this room really affect the way that the sound gets to you, especially the way the frequencies get to you, than when you're sitting in the seats. And the audience at any show is going to be in the seats. So you want to EQ for the audience. You don't want to EQ for the booth. So usually you're going to want to take the iPad and go sit in the seats. Separate video on the iPad later. Oh, gosh, freaking darn it. Another thing that I forgot to explain during sound day is distance is correlated to frequency. Wavelength is correlated to frequency. Why do rooms have good and bad acoustics? Well, it's based on if the walls are parallel, because parallel walls create a perfect distance between them in which the frequencies that are equal to that distance are amplified more than anything else. So obviously, This room, this theater, was built to be a gym originally. And that's why it's just one big box, which makes it great for fitting the seats in there and having a nice proscenium theater, but it makes it absolutely abysmal for sound designers trying to EQ for the acoustics of the room. Because this bouncing of frequencies is gonna mean that we're always gonna have way too much reverb. I also forgot to cover the difference between reverb and echo. I'll have to get to that in the effects video. Okay, watch the rest of the videos. Let's see, what else do I need to get to? I think that's basically it for EQ. The last thing, high cuts, pretty simple. You can cut out a large majority of sound, and obviously if everything is being cut out by the high cut, when I talk into the mic, nothing happens. Same thing with low cut. If I take the low cut, which is this bad boy, and I turn it up, I can cut out all of the sound. Lovely. One last cool thing you can do with EQ is if you are editing these, like editing videos, or you're dealing with background noise, like I am right now for this video because of this stupid dimmer rack. If you're dealing with background noise, you have two options. You can take your gate, find exactly how loud the background noise. So right now I'm gonna take this mic and I'm just gonna point it at the dimmer, and you can see exactly how loud the background noise is. And as long as I have my gate above that, I'm cutting out the noise. Second option is I could also take the same mic, point it at the dimmer. Let me turn up the gain on the mic a little bit so that you can hear it a little better. Are we seeing anything? No, not yet. Hold on, hold on. There we go. You see that? Hold on, let's turn off the EQ for right now. Jesus Christ. Okay, hold on. The gain is really high, which means this mic is really sensitive. So this is dangerous, but also just look at that. I can't, oh God. Never turn the gain too high. I could not tell if that beating was the pulse of my heartbeat in my hand or the dimmer rack. But I'm gonna assume it was the dimmer rack. And let's say that it was the dimmer rack. You could see that it was an isolated frequency because that thing is humming. You can find the musical note of that hum, you can find the distance or the frequency of that musical note, and then you can cut it out using an EQ that looks like this. Just take one of these, slap it over that frequency, and you can effectively cut out that background noise. Lovely. Okay, I think that's gonna do it for this video. Today you learned gain, gate, dynamics, low cut, and EQ. Alrighty, catch y'all in the flip side.